Millennial, Zennial, Alpha. Do you notice a lot of these terms thrown around frequently on social media? And if you are like me, do you also get confused as to which generation comes when? If yes, then you have come to the right place, or rather clicked the right video. Let's once and for all decode the 7 generations. But first, why do we have so many generations? What is the rationale? The idea is that people born around the same time have similar experiences cultural, technological, political, and usually in a period spanning of approximately 15 to 20 years, the landscape of the world does change significantly, and hence the experienced reality. Therefore, you feel your parents cannot understand what you are going through, and your kids probably have similar complaints from you. Generational divide is a real thing. While the cutoff years can seem arbitrary and there is no real actual scientific basis, there is fluidity in the start and end dates. So don't get too upset, especially if you're in the cusp years. You do you. Also, please note that the dates, the demographic context, and the cultural identifiers may vary by country and the political situation it was in. Okay, so here we go. There are 7 generations from 1900 to 2024, that is the current day. However, before we go into those, it would be good to note that there is a term for people born in the 1880s who came of age in the 1920s. They are known as the lost generation. It was common for those then to live in multi-generational homes. Infant mortality was high. Average lifespan was understandably limited. This generation was lost to the two world wars. With the death of 117-year-old Nabi Tajima on 21st April 2018, the lost generation cohort ended, making next the greatest generation, the earliest generation with living members as of today. So, our first generation would be 1901 to 1927, the greatest generation. They were defined by the Great Depression and made up most of the enlisted forces in World War II. They had hard lives. Their childhood and teenage years faced great odds, but they did not whine. They fought and built their lives in spite of all the hardships. It was a great time for music, literature, the arts, and even cinema. This was the period, after all, that is referred to as the golden age of Hollywood. The second generation that is still alive today would be the silent generation, people born between 1928 and 1945, also sometimes known as the traditionalist generation. The Great Depression of the 1930s and World War II in the early to mid 1940s caused people to have fewer children, and as a result, the generation is comparatively small. They kept their heads down and worked hard, earning the title of silent. They played by the rules, played it safe. Frugality is another characteristic they identify with. Getting their money's worth was crucial. Next, we have the baby boomers, born between 1946 and 1964. As the name suggests, there was an unprecedented number of births in this period. This was also a period of significant reforms and mass access to products previously considered luxury. Prosperity and wealth were the buzzwords. Most governments were spending majority of their budget on welfare. Did you know that today boomers still hold more than 48% of the seats in Congress, that is in the US, despite being just slightly over 21% of the population? and it is also the generation holding on to the most wealth. While these are numbers from the US, I think the numbers are fairly relatable to most countries. It is also interesting to note that baby boomers will be over the age of 65 by 2030, and it is the members of this generation that will set future policies around aging, healthcare, and retirement. Now we come to Generation X or Gen X. Born between 1965 and 1980, this is a smaller generation squished between the bigger generations of the baby boomers and millennials. Gen X is characterized by increased participation of women in the workforce, increased divorce rates, surge in musical genres such as alternative rock, hip hop, punk, post punk, rave, heavy metal, grunge, grindcore. You get the drift. The birth control pills debuted, and there was a drop in birth rates. These were also the first kids to have access to personal computers at homes and schools and witnessed the rise of the internet and the dot-com bubble. Up next, the famous, or should I say the infamous, millennials, also less commonly known as Gen Y. Born between 1980 and 1996, amidst the rising terrorism from the Middle East, they were born into the internet. They are the first generation, I feel, who do not know anything about how the world existed without the World Wide Web. They are marked by elevated use of technology and devices. In spite of higher education rates, this generation has experienced economic slowdown. They continue to have fewer children than their predecessors. Millennials are reshaping political discourse with a renewed interest in social democracy. Last but one, we have Generation Z or Gen Z. Born between 1997 and 2012, they are the first real digital natives. This is the online generation. Be it shopping, working, dating, meeting, sharing, everything is mostly online. Coming of age in times of a global pandemic, climate crisis, and global war, this generation seems to have the highest numbers of mental illness. They are educated, well behaved, stressed, and depressed. They have the world at their disposal and can't seem to decide which way to go or what channel to choose. Finally, the newest on the block, Gen Alpha or Generation Alpha. Born between 2013 and 2024, this generation has its own lingo which nobody can understand. And I need to do a video on that, but I digress. These screenagers swear by influencers and shape the social media landscape. And I frankly don't know what else they do. One wonders, will they be ever ready for adulthood? So, did you learn something new today? What generation are you? And what do you identify as? For example, I'm a Gen Z who identifies as a cusp between Gen Z and the millennials. I was born to Gen X, probably cusp of Gen X and boomers, parents. My brother is clearly a millennial or Gen Y. I married a late Gen X and gave birth to a cusp of Gen Z and Alpha. Which generation is the happiest of all, you think? Do let me know in comments. I personally feel the boomers are the happiest. Or maybe it's just true that the older you get, the happier you get? Well, all this deep diving into these generations brought up another related point. Tangential, but related. So today there are 7 generations alive, or I would say at most given points, there will be 7 generations alive. Have you heard of the ancient Indian Sanatan Dharma wisdom about that you get parts of attributes, indriyas, and flesh from your great grandfather and mother, grandfather and mother, and the father and mother. That is 3 generations. You contribute your attributes, indriyas, and flesh down to 3 generations. So, 3 generations before you, and then 3 generations after you, that is a total of 7. What is integral to you always lives for 7 generations. And hence the derived wisdom that whatever action you take today, you should think of the long lasting impact. While reading on this and researching on this further, I was fascinated to read a related concept that comes from Native American culture. It is called the 7 generations principle. Basically, the same thing. The belief that when making decisions, one should consider how their actions will impact the next 7 generations to come. Such wisdom that will always be relevant. What do you think?